Have you ever had a behavior that you really wanted to move forward, you really wanted to get better at, and for whatever reason, you just couldn't quite find a way to get yourself to do it? Sometimes we blame ourselves, sometimes we blame our willpower, but it's not your fault. It's actually you don't have the right map. And in this video, I'm going to share with you a strategy from the best selling book, Tiny Habits, that you can use to really decode your behavior and do behavioral design. It's really powerful because when we change our behaviors, we change our habits, and our habits create our reality. So make sure you write this down and put it into action because if you learn it, it's great. But if you put it into action, it can transform your life. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the concept is B equals map. So it's kind of a formula. Behavior is when we have the right motivation and ability and a prompt. You could be really motivated to lift a car, but if you don't have the ability to do it, it really doesn't matter. You can have the ability to do a certain task, but if you're not motivated to do it, then you might not do it. And if you don't have a prompt to remind you to do it, you could have the motivation and the ability, but just forget to do it. So when we have all three working together, that will enforce the behavior that we want. So whether it's we want to create a new behavior or we want to stop a behavior that's working against us, we need to know this. So here's a graph, and this is the Fogg Behavior Model. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have motivation. This represents motivation. And on the horizontal, we have ability. On the vertical, up high, the elements on the high side of the vertical would mean you need more motivation in order to do these actions. And if on the low side, it would mean you need less motivation to do these actions. To the left, in the ability, this would be that these actions are hard to do, these behaviors are hard to do. And on the right, it would be these actions are easier to do. So in the middle, we have this action line. Okay. So prompts will fail if something is too hard to do and you don't have enough motivation to get it done. Prompts will succeed if it is easy to do and you have enough motivation to cross that action line. Now, this is valuable because when you can decode the behavior that you're trying to either take or stop, you can engineer and determine how you want to decrease or improve the motivation or decrease or improve your ability to move that action forward. So let me give you some examples so this makes a little more sense. So for example, this blue dot here would represent an action that's easy to do that would you'd have high motivation to do. For example, brushing your teeth, right? So you want to make sure that you brush your teeth because you want to keep your teeth healthy. And it's really easy to do. You grab a toothbrush and you brush it. Chances are you already have that habit. Now, what about writing a book? Now, if you have the motivation to write a book, you might say, "Oh, I really want to do this, but it's hard. I have no idea where to start. I haven't ever done it before. I don't know how to write. I don't know how to edit. I don't know all the processes or tools I need." So you would think that might be too hard to do, even though you might be very motivated, saying this could be perhaps the best marketing tool that I could use to market for my business. If you were going to, if someone asked me, "Hey, Kenny, do you want to beat the Domino's world record?" Now, for me, that would be really hard to do. There's already a lot of world records out there for Domino's. So you'd have to work really hard in order to do that. And for me, my motivation would be very low. So the likelihood that I'm going to do that anytime in my lifetime is very, very slim. Now, if you said, what about watching social media? Well, that's really easy for me to do. And it doesn't take much motivation at all. All it takes is kind of like a good headline, and I can get hooked into a social media story or a video just because it was entertaining, it looked interesting, and it was really easy to do. It was right in my hand. I press a button and I'm there, right? So then let's look at about engineering something, engineering a behavior that you'd want to take. Okay. In this final example. Now, let's say if you wanted to create content on a daily basis or maybe several times a week. I've known people that have wanted to do this. They had motivation to do this because they realized that they need to put out content to share with their audience so they could build trust, rapport, credibility. They had the motivation, but they thought it was too hard to do. They didn't know where to start. They didn't have a strategy. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know which tools or channels they should use. So, in order to get them over the action line, they've got to determine what they could change. Now, they know it's already important and they're pretty motivated, but they have other priorities. So, it may be hard to increase the motivation just by saying, hey, look, this could really be beneficial. This will work through time to potentially get you business. You notice how I phrased it? It will work through time to potentially get you business. So you could take the action. You may not actually see any from it immediately. So the chances of motivation being the game changer here are very slim. So instead, we want to change the ability. We want to move the ability forward by making it easier to do. So how can we make it easier to do? Well, we can work with a guide to come up with a content strategy. We can use templates to help us follow a simple process. We can use tools to help us automate the process. We can delegate and have people help us get our ideas into action. So, this is just an example of how you can plot your behaviors on this Fogg behavior model and then engineer them in such a way so that you can get your ideas that you really want to do, that you want to move forward, but maybe you just don't have enough motivation and maybe don't have the ability to get it over the action line. And then you can ideate, what can I do that would help me get over that action line so that I'm getting this idea in action and changing what's possible for me, those I serve, and those that are important to me. So that is what I've got. And if you thought this was helpful, I'd like to see your thoughts in the comments, and any likes and shares would be greatly appreciated. I'm dedicating my life and my energy to help people amplify their business, and your support is greatly appreciated. Without further ado, thanks for tuning in to Growth Amplifiers, and look to see you on the next show.